Blue and red lights flashed in my rear view, and my heart skipped a beat. 2 patrol cars rolled up in front of my house like they were about to arrest me. Delilah Thornfield, the HOA president from hell, was screaming at the officers, pointing at me, demanding I be hauled away. "He's got commercial vehicles. He's not even in our HOA." Just an hour ago, I had told her, calm as could be, that I wasn't part of her HOA, but that didn't stop her. As the officers walked away, I couldn't help but smile. What she didn't know was that I'd been digging for months, and what I found was going to destroy everything she thought she knew. This was just the beginning. Delilah Thornfield stepped out of her white Mercedes, heels clicking on the gravel like she owned the whole damn road. She flashed a smile that felt more like a threat than a greeting, wearing a perfectly pressed Lily Pulitzer dress and a scent that screamed money. But the moment she opened her mouth, her true nature showed. "Garrett Mackenzie," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "I'm your HOA president, and we need to have a talk." I tried to stay calm. "There's been a mistake. I'm not in your HOA." She didn't even blink. "Oh, you will be, whether you like it or not." Her smile never wavered, but the underlying message was crystal clear. She wasn't used to being told no, and she was about to make my life hell for daring to stand up to her. I never expected to find myself back in Millbrook, Tennessee. After the divorce, I thought I was done with small-town life. But when my ex-wife cleaned me out, I had no choice but to drive my loaded F-350 toward my grandfather's old farmhouse. It had been abandoned for 5 years, peeling paint, a sagging porch, and a barn that smelled like it hadn't seen a coat of paint in decades. But it was still mine. 2.5 acres of land, inherited through 4 generations of Mackenzies since 1923. I'd spent 3 months crashing on a buddy's couch, and suddenly, this run-down farmhouse felt like paradise. What I didn't expect was the invasion. The suburban sprawl that had grown up around my property was something out of a bad dream. Willowbrook Estates, a development of 200 identical McMansions, was built right up to my property line. Fancy names like the Wellington, the Cambridge, cookie-cutter houses with lawns that looked like golf courses. It was the kind of place where the neighbors probably had country club memberships and spent their weekends at brunch, but it wasn't for people like me. On my first morning, I was unloading my equipment trailer when I heard the click of high heels on gravel. I looked up and saw Delilah Thornfield, the HOA president, strutting across the driveway toward me. Blonde hair frozen in place by too much hairspray, a leather folder clutched in her hand like it contained some secret power. She had that look, the kind you get when you know you're about to tell someone their life is about to get a whole lot harder. "Welcome to Willowbrook," she chirped with a smile so fake it could have been made in a factory. "I'm Delilah Thornfield, your HOA president. I've got a community welcome packet for you." I took the packet, eyeing it warily. "Thanks, but there's been a misunderstanding. I'm not part of your HOA." Her smile faltered, just slightly. "Oh, but you will be," she said with a tilt of her head. "Everyone in this area maintains our community standards. Property values, you know." I glanced around at the pristine rows of McMansions and back at my grandfather's weathered farmhouse. "This property's been in my family for almost a century. I don't think your community standards apply here." Her smile faded, replaced by something cold. "Oh, I think you'll find that things are different here, Mr. Mackenzie." And just like that, I knew it wasn't just about lawns and paint. Delilah Thornfield had a plan, and I wasn't a part of it. But little did she know, I had a plan of my own. The next few days felt like a strange game of cat and mouse. Delilah didn't waste any time trying to bend me to her will. Just 3 days after our first encounter, I was elbow-deep in a carburetor rebuild when I heard the rumble of diesel engines. Through the barn doors, I spotted a white county truck followed by Delilah's Mercedes creeping up my driveway like a funeral procession. Out stepped a heavy-set inspector in a wrinkled polo shirt, already sweating in the Tennessee heat. Behind him, Delilah appeared, her sunglasses perched on her nose, wearing that same shark-like grin. "Mr. Mackenzie," the inspector said, reading from a clipboard, "we've received multiple complaints about potential zoning violations on this property." I wiped my greasy hands on a rag, trying to stay calm. "What kind of complaints?" Delilah stepped forward, holding her phone up like a judge reading a verdict. "Commercial vehicles in a residential zone," she declared, her voice flat, rehearsed. Unlicensed business operations and possible environmental contamination from automotive fluids. I looked at her, holding back a laugh. She was working overtime, spinning a web of lies to get me in trouble. Inspector, I said slowly, what's the zoning classification for this property? He flipped through the paperwork, sweat dripping onto the pages. Let's see here. Appears to be agricultural residential mixed use. And what does that allow for? I asked. Commercial vehicle storage, equipment for agricultural and construction purposes, he said, finally understanding. No violations here, Mr. Mackenzie. Delilah's fake smile cracked. Surely there are noise ordinances, environmental regulations. Ma'am, the inspector interrupted, snapping his clipboard shut. Everything here appears fully compliant. It was the first victory, but the tension in the air thickened. Delilah stood there, mouth agape, as the inspector hurried off, leaving her behind. But I knew this wasn't over. Delilah wasn't the type to quit easily. The next time I saw Delilah, she was standing near the property line with a surveyor's wheel, measuring my driveway as if she owned the place. It was a direct violation. This wasn't a city project, and she had no business being on my land. Ma'am, I called out, striding over to her. What the hell are you doing on my property? She didn't look up. Just making sure your driveway isn't encroaching on county right-of-way, she said with a dismissive wave, as if it was perfectly normal to trespass on someone's land. I could feel my blood boil. I've had this land surveyed. My boundaries are clear. Delilah turned toward me, that same smug smile on her face. We'll see about that. 2 days later, I woke up to find my mailbox destroyed. It wasn't just knocked over. It was smashed to pieces, like someone had taken a sledgehammer to it. And the timing wasn't a coincidence. Just a day before, Delilah had sent me a letter threatening another fine for my violations. Now, my mailbox was in ruins. I called the sheriff's office to report it, but there wasn't much they could do. No proof, no suspects. Delilah's subtle sabotage was beginning to feel like a personal vendetta. Later that afternoon, I caught her car creeping past my driveway again, phone glued to her ear. She was making calls, probably getting every city official to back her play, and I had no doubt she'd made the call to destroy my mailbox. This wasn't just harassment anymore. It was a campaign of intimidation. The next morning, just as I was finishing a cup of coffee, a patrol car pulled into my driveway. Officer Martinez, a young guy, stepped out and approached me cautiously. "Morning, Mr. Mackenzie," he said, flipping through his notes. "We got a call about suspicious activity." Suspicious? I raised an eyebrow. Suspicious how? He checked his notepad, clearly reading from someone else's script. Anonymous caller reported possible drug manufacturing, unusual chemical odors, frequent visitors at odd hours. I nearly spit out my coffee. Drug manufacturing? I couldn't help but laugh. "I'm just rebuilding carburetors in my shop. No meth labs here, officer." Martinez took a look around, then shrugged. "Nothing out of the ordinary here. Just doing my job." It was clear to me. Delilah was using the local authorities to harass me, weaponizing the police. The damage she was causing to my reputation was starting to pile up. Then came the breaking point. On Thursday, a second patrol car showed up, this time in response to another suspicious activity report. This time the complaint was about Rusty, my dog. Apparently, someone had called in about Rusty being aggressive toward children. When Officer Martinez showed up again, I was ready to snap. He looked at Rusty, who was lying in the shade, belly up, happily being scratched by the neighbor's kid. Martinez shook his head. "This is the same number, same complaint, different person." I could see it now. Delilah was using the police department to do her dirty work, making false reports to escalate the situation. But this time, it was different. I wasn't going to take it anymore. That night, I started documenting everything, every phone call, every drive-by, every interaction with the authorities. I knew the next step wasn't just defense. It was time to go on offense. And what Delilah didn't know was that every step she took was making my case stronger. The night of the HOA meeting, I could feel the tension in the air as soon as I walked into the room. Normally, these meetings were small, with a handful of bored residents complaining about lawn care schedules and pool maintenance. Tonight, it felt like a battle was about to be waged. The room was packed, over 200 people crammed into the community clubhouse. Local news crews had set up cameras, their bright lights blinding as they made the whole place feel like a courtroom. Delilah Thornfield stood at the podium trying to keep her usual polished smile in place, but I could see the cracks in her facade. She could feel the pressure. "Good evening, neighbors," she said, her voice forced, trying to regain control. "I'm here to address the recent misunderstandings regarding Mr. Mackenzie's property. As your HOA president, I feel it's my duty to protect the integrity of our community." I stood up slowly, every eye in the room turning toward me. "You want to protect the integrity of the community, Delilah?" I said, cutting her off. "Then let's talk about integrity." The murmurs in the room grew louder as I walked to the front, carrying a thick folder of documents. I opened it, pulling out the first piece of evidence, a certified survey map, the same one Delilah had ignored when I'd sent her a polite letter about the trespassing fence. "Here's the thing, Delilah," I said, laying the map on the table where everyone could see. "This is an official survey showing that your fence and garden shed are sitting on my property. You've had a month to correct this, and instead you've continued your harassment. Not only that, but I've got recordings, emails, and photos proving you've been weaponizing the police and local authorities to target me." I paused for effect, watching Delilah's face turn pale. "And it gets better. You've also been using your position to bribe and intimidate." I hit play on my phone, and Bradley Thornfield's voice echoed through the speakers, admitting to using political influence to pressure me. The room fell silent. I could see some people looking back and forth between Delilah and me, starting to put the pieces together. Delilah's smile was gone. Her hands trembled as she clutched the podium, but there was nothing she could do now. The truth was out, and it hit harder than a wrecking ball. "You're trying to extort money from our community," Delilah finally stammered, her voice cracking with desperation. "This is all lies." But the damage was done. I could feel the eyes of the community on her, the whispers starting to build into a hum of disbelief. A couple of people from the back stood up, demanding answers, and soon the room was in chaos. Bradley Thornfield tried to step in, but it was too late. The reporters were all over him now, asking about his involvement, his role in fast-tracking permits for a development built on questionable legal ground. The questions hit him like punches, and his political armor crumbled before the whole room. "I'm not the bad guy here," Delilah shouted, her voice rising in panic. "This is all a setup." I turned to the crowd, holding up the last piece of evidence. "The truth is, Delilah, you've been holding this neighborhood hostage with your greed and control. But this is the moment it all ends." As Delilah's face flushed red with fury and embarrassment, I couldn't help but feel a surge of satisfaction. For the first time in months, I wasn't the one under attack. The tables had turned. The aftermath was nothing short of explosive. The chaos of the meeting lingered in the air long after the reporters packed up and left. But the real work had just begun. The residents of Willowbrook Estates were shaken, but they weren't broken. Delilah's reign of terror had exposed cracks in the perfect suburban illusion she'd created, and people were starting to speak out. As I left the meeting, Mrs. Finley, the kind neighbor who had helped me with gossip and support, approached me with a relieved smile. "You did it, Garrett. You really did it." Her words were a balm to my soul. The neighbors who had once feared Delilah were now gathering together, talking openly about the years of harassment, the fines, and the unfair treatment. For the first time, it felt like Willowbrook might actually become the community it was meant to be. The change wasn't immediate, but it was there. People were starting to come together, quietly organizing, sharing their stories, finding strength in numbers. For the first time, Delilah's toxic influence had a limit. The legal fallout came quickly. Delilah's bribe attempt, her harassment, and the corruption involving her husband didn't go unnoticed. The quiet title action I'd filed had already sent shockwaves through the county, and the media was eating it up. By the time the dust settled, not only had I secured my rightful land, but Delilah's carefully crafted empire was crumbling. Bradley Thornfield resigned from the city council. Federal charges for bribery and corruption followed shortly after. Delilah, once the queen of Willowbrook, had been exposed for the tyrant she truly was. The HOA board voted to dissolve, and in its place a new democratically elected community board was established. Mrs. Finley, that calm, dignified voice of reason, was elected as president. Jake Morrison, the quiet veteran who had helped me through the hardest days, took on a role to manage neighborhood security and maintenance. Together, they implemented a new vision for Willowbrook, where fairness and cooperation triumphed over control and intimidation. The final twist of karma came when Delilah, beaten and broken, moved away to Florida. Word was, she'd taken up work as a real estate agent, helping clients verify property titles, a job so fitting for the woman who once tried to ruin so many lives with her own shady dealings. It almost felt poetic. As for me, life slowly found its balance again. I kept the old farmhouse, but it was no longer just a place to hide from my past. I'd built something new here, something more than just a home. The land that had been in my family for generations was secure, and my small engine repair business thrived, expanding into a more meaningful operation that helped others in the community. The Mackenzie Property Rights Foundation was born from this experience, helping rural families navigate the kind of developer pressure I had faced. We provided free legal assistance, checking title histories, and making sure others wouldn't fall victim to the same shady tactics Delilah had used. Even the neighborhood was healing. The Johnsons replanted their vegetable garden, bigger than before. The Patels grew a spice garden that filled the air with fragrant smells. Jake's motorcycle club hosted monthly maintenance workshops for kids. I couldn't help but smile at the transformation. What started as a nightmare had turned into something beautiful. Something I'd never expected when I first arrived. My life was richer, not just in the legal victory, but in the friends I'd made, the community we'd built, and the freedom we'd reclaimed together. But there was one final surprise. One afternoon, as I sat on my porch with Emma, the librarian who had helped me with property research, I received a letter from Delilah. It was brief, just a few lines of apology, admitting she had let fear and pride override common sense. She signed it "Best regards," before mentioning she was now working in real estate. I sat back in my chair, Rusty curled up at my feet, and for the first time in years, I felt at peace. The road to this moment hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. And the best part? I knew from this point forward, I'd never have to look over my shoulder again. The real victory wasn't just legal, it was the freedom to live my life on my terms. So, let me ask you, have you ever had to fight for what was rightfully yours? Whether it was an HOA nightmare, a property dispute, or just standing up against the odds? Drop your story in the comments below. You never know, your experience might help someone else find the courage to fight back, just like I did. And if you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Trust me, this won't be the last time the little guy takes down Goliath.